Thank you guys for joining. My name is Emily Asher. I'm the current president of the ACLU Student Chapter at Capital University. And we encourage diverse perspectives to come together and discuss interesting topics that are affecting the legal world. And we appreciate having Chris here to put this panel together.
Thank you, Emily. Appreciate it. And welcome all. We will see our participation rise as I guess throughout this. And if you're not watching live, thanks for watching the recording. And my name is Chris. I'm the evening representative for Capital Law ACLU. And I'm going to let the guests introduce themselves. We'll start off with Juan Passarelli.
Hi, I'm Juan Passarelli. I've been a close friend of Julian for 10 years. I've filmed him throughout that time as a journalist and filmmaker. I was the person who was in charge of beaming him out of the embassy for the years he was there and was close to him throughout that period, suffered the espionage that was done through the Spanish contractor UC Global, which was in charge of taking care in the security around the embassy, supposedly protecting Julian, but was in fact spying on Julian and transmitting all that information to the United States, to the CIA.
Great. I appreciate it. And then we'll go Gabriel next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gabriel Shipton, Julian's brother. I've been advocating for Julian for the last, since he's been in prison, basically, the last few years. So, good to be here.
Appreciate it. Next, we'll go Misty.
I'm Misty Winston. I co-host the Action for Assange weekly online vigil for Julian Assange. We've been doing that for 121 weeks now, and just an activist. We've organized a lot of events, mostly in the DC and Columbus, Ohio areas. But yeah, I'm just happy to be here. Thank you for putting this together, Chris.
Thank you. And last but not least, Stephen.
Thank you. Steve Rohde. I'm on the steering committee of the National Assange Defense Committee and the working group here in Los Angeles. I am a retired constitutional and civil rights lawyer, have written extensively on the Assange case, as well as spent upwards of 40 years fighting for free speech and freedom of the press. So this issue couldn't be more important to me.
I appreciate it. And the date is also important why we're here. In 2 days, the extradition hearing will be heard by the British High Court on October 27th and October 28th, which will the ultimate decision if Assange gets extradited to the United States for where he's facing up to 175 years in prison. And as of yesterday, Netflix also had released a very timely release of the We Steal Secrets documentary that came out back in 2013, which we'll touch on a little bit later as well. So we are sandwiched right in the middle of both of those timely dates. But before we kick off into some details, we're going to discuss how we got here and why all of us are here together today. And back in 2010, Julian Assange, the founder and editor of Wikileaks, was provided information through encryption from an anonymous source, as all of the information through Wikileaks is provided, which he released throughout the year of 2010. At first was the Baghdad airstrike of the collateral murder video in April 2010. The Afghanistan war logs in July 2010, preceded by the Iraq war logs in October 2010, and Cablegate in November 2010. And after these leaks in 2010, the United States government launched a criminal investigation into WikiLeaks. And since then, the nationwide ACLU has shown its support for Assange and freeing him, and been hard against the extradition of Assange to the United States, and reinforced that a week ago as well with 23 other coalition members in a letter to the Department of Justice. So that is why we are here. We're going to also go into some details of what these war logs held, why it was important, and Julian's belief on the freedom of information, along with Chelsea Manning, formerly Brian Manning, who
Bradley,
sorry, thank you, Bradley Manning, who had been ended up being the provider of this information as a Army intelligence analyst. So I invite down the line anyone else to add information on the background of why we're here. Juan, would you like to add to that of my brief of why we're here? For those who may not know Julian Assange, or full detail of why this is important and why we're here.
Yeah, so back in 2010, WikiLeaks revealed firstly a helicopter video from an Apache helicopter, two Apache helicopters, who murdered several civilians in Iraq, including two Reuters journalists, and wounded two children who were in a van when they made the one pass of people. There was a survivor. A van stopped a guy who was driving his kids to school, and they stopped to help this civilian, and the helicopters got a green light to shoot the van as well. Along with that, WikiLeaks revealed the rules of engagement, and it was very clear from the rules of engagement that what happened there was murder. After that, WikiLeaks revealed the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs, which are significant acts that happened during that period. These are logs made by the U.S. Army every time a significant act that happens, and so that's basically every time that a bomb goes off, a fire is shot, they have to report it, and they paint the exact picture of what the war was, from the killing of civilians at checkpoints, entire families being wiped out just because the car was going too fast, the use of civilians as in front of cars of military vehicles to detect IEDs. That is literally using them as if the weapon explodes, then that's it. They also discovered the war logs detailed assassination squad in Afghanistan, and also quite severe cases of torture, and torture by the Iraqi military, which was under the command of the United States, and the US was giving handing over people to the Iraqi military, whilst knowing that they were torturing people. And this was known by the highest people in government at the time. Then there was a big release of diplomatic cables. These are communications that go from all the embassies around the world to the State Department and back, that detail all the strategy, diplomatic strategy that the United States has in different parts of the world. In it, there was vast amount of corruption, torture detailed. There was orders to spy on UN members, get their DNA, fingerprints, including Ban Ki-moon, at the time the head of the United Nations. the cables detailed how, for example, a CIA squad kidnapped or renditioned is the nice word that they use for kidnap. German citizen called Khalid al-Masri in Macedonia, who they mistook for an alleged terrorist, and they brought him to a black site. They tortured him, they sodomized him, and after a while they realized they had the wrong man, so they decided to drop him off in the middle of nowhere in a mountain in Albania for him to find his way back. And then Wikileaks released the Guantanamo Bay files, which detailed all the prisoners in Guantanamo Bay and their treatment, the use of the special interrogation techniques, which are now classified as torture.
Where does the Abu Ghraib prison information fall into that? Was that part of
Abu Ghraib was another leak, but what the WikiLeaks files revealed is that the torture continued after Abu Ghraib, and there was very little done about it. It's also very important to know that all these war crimes have never been punished. There's not a single US person that has been punished because of these crimes, yet Julian Assange is in prison, has been incarcerated in one form or another for 11 years, and faces 175 years of torture. And this is no less than torture. The special administrative measures that they plan to use on him is isolation 24 hours a day. They say that he gets an hour of fresh air a day, but that is literally just another cell that is empty and has where he cannot communicate with anybody for him to breathe fresh air. And then he would have 15 minutes worth of spied FBI monitored conversations with approved family members, and well, that's how he would spend the rest of his lifetime. Going back to the releases, then WikiLeaks released WikiLeaks is the organization that has released more secrets tenfold than any other media, and probably all the mainstream media combined. Going all the way up to Vault 7, which was a CIA release in 2017. The release detailed their cyber war weapons, including how they could turn on and off cameras and microphones from cell phones and from TVs and from computers, all the way up to how they could hack a car, modern cars, were using the Wi-Fi antennas and be able to press the brakes or the accelerator of the car, and also how to hack anything that they would want to hack and make it look like it was a foe, like the Russia or China. That got the CIA very angry. Mike Pompeo decided to denominate WikiLeaks as a hostile non-state intelligence agency. And what that meant was that it was a legal way of classifying WikiLeaks so that they could operate in the dark and not have to report what their operations were on WikiLeaks to even the congressional or Senate committees. And this is what the latest revelations show, that the CIA was planned the kidnapping or the murder of Julian and other WikiLeaks journalists that they suspected might have Vault 7. This includes several of my friends, and it could have included me if they thought I had it. Well, that brings us up to today.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Henry Dean, can you just mute yourself if you don't mind? Appreciate it. And to piggyback off of that, that one of the first topics you brought up was the Reuters reporters that were murdered in the video of the Apache helicopters. Back when that murder was reported, Reuters asked for all the information that was attached to that incident. They were only given by the United States military and the Army the actual transcript from that issue. They demanded for the video, and they knew the video existed, and the United States government claimed that video was top secret and was classified information. And they couldn't release the video, but they could release the transcript of what had occurred. And they knew, they knew that seeing that video and seeing the images of something like that would let the public know of how awful of a crime that was, because the images speak millions of words compared to what a transcript would. And that's the same thing goes for the Abu Ghraib photos. Once those photos were released, once those photos were released, we knew how awful the torture that was happening, as opposed to just transcripts or essays or write-ups from these situations, which is what the United States government wanted to be hidden. But it's the information that Julian and all of us believe that it should be free to us. Does anybody else briefly have anything else to add to that? The other thing that we didn't touch on was the DNC emails and Hillary Clinton's emails that proved that the DNC essentially rigged their election 2016 against Bernie Sanders, which gave Hillary Clinton the nomination in the 2016 primary election. So anybody, Stephen, would you like to chime in?
Well, I would, and I'm grateful to Juan for such a comprehensive summary of those revelations, because that's really where it starts. We should be conducting this webinar today to honor and celebrate the journalism and courage of Julian Assange. And we should be able to convene this program at the time when the perpetrators of the war crimes that were depicted in Collateral Murder and in the other documents, that is the prosecution that we should be focusing on, not the prosecution of Julian Assange, a truth teller, a journalist, a public servant who created WikiLeaks in order to provide a platform for the release of key documents revealing government impropriety and going as far as war crimes. That's what we're talking about here. This is singly the most serious attack on freedom of the press in our lifetimes. The fact that the uproar does not exist across the United States, if not across the world, that this man has been punished. He has already been punished, irrespective of the extradition hearings and what may come in the future. Julian Assange has been punished by the forces of the United States government with the complicity of the British government to silence him and to demonstrate and set a precedent for the silencing of anyone who has the audacity to speak truth to power. That's really what's at stake here. I'm grateful for everyone who's come to this program and other programs that are going on this week in particular. Toward the end of the program, we'll discuss what you individually, every screen I'm looking at today, what you can do to stop the persecution of Julian Assange. The importance of the revelations in 2010 and 2011 are also how it revealed the concealment and what the United States government was not revealing. The 400,000 field reports on the Iraq war contain 15 100,000 unreported deaths of Iraqi civilians and evidence of systemic torture and murder. The Afghan war logs revealed more civilian casualties by coalition forces, and the Guantanamo files revealed 150 innocent people who'd been subjected to torture, who were innocent, and the abuse of the rest of the 800 men and boys in violation of the Geneva Conventions and the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhumane, and Degrading Treatment or Punishment. Those are the real crimes that have occurred in these last decades. And the fact that the perpetrators of those war crimes walk free, write books, appear as pundits on television, are lauded as our former President Bush is lauded in comparison to President Trump. That is the most serious violation of human rights and freedom of the press that we're discussing today. And I do hope by digging deep into these issues together, people will understand the urgency of this moment, and that it was the Obama administration that refused to indict Julian Assange with the same evidence before them because of the so-called New York Times problem. How can we indict and prosecute Julian Assange as a journalist for publishing and revealing information when those very same publications like the New York Times and the Guardian and Le Monde and others publish the very same information? And given that quandary, the Obama administration refused to indict Julian Assange. The Trump administration, with the push of Pompeo, indicted Julian Assange, and we have seen what has played out. And when the British judge denied extradition, the case should have ended there. Julian should have been able to join his wife and his children, recover from the mental and physical torture that he's been subjected to. And instead, what happened? The Biden administration took up the Trump prosecution, and to this very week will appear in London to argue to overturn the British decision denying extradition on humanitarian grounds. Shame on the Biden administration, shame on Merrick Garland. That's where our activism needs to be directed.
Appreciate it, Stephen. And from a lot of my research that I'd gone through this, some of the only punishment that I had seen was when the Abu Ghraib photos had been released. There was a couple of privates that tortured, raped, and humiliated prisoners of war, and they had gotten about 6 to 9 months in jail and were demoted in their military rank. That's about it. The maximum, I think, punishment that I had seen. Briefly, Misty, do you have anything else to add before we transition to the next topic?
Juan and Stephen both, really summed it up pretty well. I do want to add, Juan mentioned that, WikiLeaks and Julian Assange has exposed broken more stories than all other mainstream media combined. I think that's a very safe thing to say. And it's also important that we point out the fact that they've never gotten it wrong. They've never had to retract a single word that they've ever published. I can't think of another news organization or publishing organization with that kind of a record. And as Stephen mentioned, this sets a precedent. This should terrify everyone. This does set a historical precedent. This is the first time a journalist and publisher will be charged under the Espionage Act of the United States, and a foreign publisher. He's not an American citizen. He's being charged under American laws and not afforded the protections of the First Amendment. And I think that everybody should be concerned by that. And as both Juan and Stephen have already said, the fact that people like George W. Bush and Colin Powell can be praised as heroes, and they can go off to write, have their book deals and go on Ellen and, their painting careers. Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, John Kiriakou, we always punish our truth tellers. And that's something that we need to really examine as a society. People like Julian Assange should be, looked up to. They should be, respected, and they should not be penalized for speaking truth to power, and for, really going out of their way to put themselves in personal jeopardy, and put their liberty in jeopardy, to show us what our governments are doing in our name with our money, and the most despicable war crimes were exposed and are being exposed, and it's something that we should really. There's no reason why somebody like Julian Assange should be wasting away in Belmarsh prison, which is considered London, like the UK's Gitmo. This is not like a nice, cushy, prison. This is one of the worst prisons on earth. And there's no reason why a journalist and publisher should be sitting in there for 2.5 years now, awaiting this extradition hearing, which has been a farce from day one. He should be let out. He should be able to go home with Stella and the boys, and with Gabriel and his father, John, and able to recover from over a decade of psychological torture and more. So I'm really happy that we're having this conversation. It is unbelievably depressing to me that we still have to do this. When we first started the Action for Assange show, which was 2.5 years ago, we thought maybe 6 months, we'll have to do this for 6 months. And here we are 2.5 years later. So this is a really important case. It's really difficult for me that people don't understand how serious this is. This puts all of us in jeopardy. Anybody who cares about free speech, press freedom, and the right to know, as Stella so beautifully put in her speech, I believe it was yesterday or the day before. My days are running together right now. But she very beautifully said that what is really being criminalized here is everyone's right to know. This isn't just about Julian Assange. This is about all of us.
Appreciate
Can I just
it.
add
Go ahead, Gabriel.
on what Steve was saying and Misty was saying? A precedent was set in January 4th this year when the Judge Vanessa Breitzer decided not to extradite Julian. It was under health grounds. It was under the fact that Julian is being tortured right now and would be tortured to the extent that he might commit suicide in the United States. But as of now, any journalist who has in his possession or receives or even dares to publish a classified document of the United States can be extradited to the United States right now in the UK. And this is a precedent that, if set in the US, goes at the core of the First Amendment. It goes to the core of being able to speak, being able to transmit important information that concerns us all as a democracy about what the governments are doing in our name. And trying journalists as spies is a calamity, and it goes against everything that the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, which should be applauded by every single country on earth, says. It would allow the government to legislate who can say what in the social discourse.
Appreciate it, Juan. And my next question is going to be directed towards. Go ahead, Gabriel.
Just on the publications, I think it's really important to note the effect of the publications. What the the Afghan war diaries, the Iraq war logs, and the Guantanamo Bay, the detainee files, the effect that they've had in creating the atmosphere for the end of the Iraq war, the end of the war in Afghanistan. The almost Guantanamo Bay is almost closed. So even though we haven't seen any of these, any of the war criminals responsible for the atrocities that were revealed, there has been the effect of these publications has led, has had a very positive effect and led to the ending of these wars and the almost closure of Guantanamo Bay.
Thank you for reminding us about that. Yes, I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into that one, because there was a cable that was released concerning the slaughter of a family in Iraq. This was coalition troops that went into a farmer's house. They killed him, his mother, wife, some cousins, including 5 women, I think, and 5 children. They were shot in the back of the head and handcuffed. And there was a 5-month baby or something like that. They were all executed. And then the troops called in an air raid to bombard the house and make sure that the evidence was eliminated. There were crews in the ground that filmed the remains, and this case, the special rapporteur on extrajudicial executions got a hold of it and wrote a cable to the U.S. embassy at the UN. And when this was released, the Iraqi government was so appalled that they decided to remove the immunity that was being negotiated for troops in the ground. And this literally caused the Obama administration to bring the troops back home. So, WikiLeaks has changed the world many times, but this is a crucial example of how they've done it. They literally ended the occupation of Iraq, at least for a period of time.
Appreciate it, Juan. And I'm going to transition a little bit to the process of putting this event together. As some of you may understand, if you've organized, there's some pushback with some people who may not be as informed on the case against Julian Assange. And when putting this together, there were a couple items that were brought up, and I'd like to discuss those to clear the air on some of them. And one of the things that was brought up was the sexual assault allegations that was from Sweden, from the Swedish police, that were exposed all throughout the world, and they've been heavily pushed over here on stateside. So I will provide a link in the chat right now for anyone who'd like to read the full report from Nils Melzer, who is the special reporter on torture for the UN, who did a full investigation, unbiased, independent investigation for United Nations on this issue with the sexual assault allegations, and further into Assange's torture that he has been victim of. Does anybody want to chime in on some of that?
Yes, please.
Yes, go ahead, Misty.
Yes, this is something that I find incredibly frustrating. This is used as a distraction. The sexual assault allegations are not what Julian Assange is in prison for. It's not what he's being charged for. It has nothing to do whatsoever with the case at hand. If you believe that in those allegations, despite the fact that Nils Melzer has fairly thoroughly debunked them, that's fine. If you want to see him, he attempted to cooperate with the Swedish investigation. He made every effort to participate in that freely. And he was, pretty handedly pushed aside. They never wanted to interview him. And I think it's because, as Nils Melzer has shown, those allegations are bogus. But if you think that he needs to see a courtroom for that, that's fine. But that has nothing to do with what he's in prison for now. And it's used as a distraction, and it is used to manufacture consent for the treatment he's receiving now. It's been used to dehumanize him. It's been used to paint him in a certain light to create kind of this character, that's this horrible person, this comic book villain. And it's really been very successful. It's unfortunate that it's been successful, but it has been. And I think that it's one of the most, as an activist, that's what I do. And I can tell you that that's one of the most difficult things in dealing with the Julian Assange case, is that is almost always the number one thing that is brought up. But what it really comes down to is, number one, Nils Melzer has done a fantastic job. Chris is going to share the link. And Nils Melzer, that's not just the one article. He's written about it multitude of times. He's spoken about it on multiple different platforms. He's an incredible person. He's done a great job. I'm very grateful to have him on Team Assange. But it is, not only has it been debunked, but it really has nothing to do with this case. And this case has to do with the threat to the First Amendment and the threat to press freedom. And that's what I think people really need to be focused on. I say this all the time. Julian Assange could be the worst person on earth. Literally, he's not. I don't know. I've never met him. Maybe he's lovely. I have no idea, but it doesn't matter. He could be the worst person on earth, and I would still fight against what's happening to him because it's wrong, and it's a threat to all of us. So I think that that is just use it as a distraction, and I would invite people to really look into that case. Once you look at the facts of the allegations and everything, it very quickly falls apart.
Agreed. I appreciate Misty. If anybody is interested in that, the link is up there. Nils Melzer brings up 5 points in that. The first 2 address the background behind the sexual assault allegations and debunking it. Essentially, it was corrupt Swedish police. The CIA sent out a memo to all of its allies across the world in 2010, once all of these war logs were released, asking if you have anything on Assange, charge him for it. And once this woman actually came in just asking to get an HIV test from Assange, that's all she wanted, because she had consensual sex, and it was rewritten as a hit to Julian Assange. So it's all been debunked and translated from Sweden, and UN Special Reporter Nils Melzer is fluent in Swedish, and he was able to get the original documents from the police and translate them. So make sure you understand your sources, especially United Nations is a very great source of that with its unbiased and independent investigations of itself. We're going to transition to another part. We mentioned.
Can I just add?
Oh, go ahead.
Chris, sorry.
Yes.
I'm really glad that this subject is touched upon, because Sweden is the beginning of a massive multi-government campaign to destroy Wikileaks. And it starts with 2 women going into a clinic asking to get HIV test. The clinic tells them that they can't test them straight away, but maybe they could go to the police if they can get Julian to be tested. They weren't able to contact Julian. Julian was somebody that was staying really low profile. He's never been good at having telephones and that type of stuff. He throws them away like they were nothing, so these women go to the police to try and ask for the police to compel Julian to take an HIV test. What is noted by Melzer is that as soon as that happened, the police took the case away from the women, and they decided to say it was that there were some sort of sexual misconduct of some sort. The women, we know because of text messages, did not want to participate. We know that one of the women refused to sign the police statement, a statement that was later changed by the police without the consent of the woman. And the women were told to shut up, that they didn't know what rape was. This case was closed and then reopened by another prosecutor with the help of a very well-known lawyer who had a vendetta for the first prosecutor for gross misconduct on his part on another case, and then reopened the investigation. It's important to know that the investigation was just a preliminary investigation. Charges were never brought against Julian. The only thing Sweden wanted him for was to question him. He went to a police station when he was still in Sweden. He offered his testimony. He was cleared to leave Sweden. And then after he left, Sweden opened an arrest warrant on him. We know that for years after that, all those years, 7 years, well, actually it was 10 in total, Sweden refused for a long time to interview him. We know that there was a collaboration with the UK prosecutors who were asking Sweden not to interview Assange in London as he was asking for, as he was afraid that he would be put in prison in Sweden and then extradited to the United States, which we now know was very correct. Sweden refused to interview him in London, even though it's a very common practice. There were hundreds of people who were interviewed in London for other cases by Sweden during the time that Julian was there. And the prosecutors, at some point when Julian went into the embassy, even wrote an email. The British prosecutors wrote an email to Marianne Nee, the Swedish prosecutor: don't get cold feet right now. Don't come and interview Julian. It took 6 years for the prosecutor to come and interview Julian, and then right after that, decided to close the case. Once Julian was expelled from the embassy, kidnapped from his homeland, which was Ecuador. He had been given citizenship and then it was removed illegally. The prosecutors reopened the case and then closed it again, based on there was not enough evidence to press charges. This is a case that is absolutely irregular. There's no other case in Swedish history that compares to this case in terms of being open in preliminary investigation for 7 years, 10 years in total. This case highlights the rest of the irregularities in Julian's case from then on. So there's been 10 years of highly irregular judicial processes that can only amount to misconduct. And if it's 1 or 2 irregularities, you think, okay, maybe they made a mistake. But these are tens, dozens and dozens of irregularities all throughout, up to now, where Julian is being, according to Nils Melzer, tortured in prison for revealing war crimes.
Appreciate it, Juan. And I think it's important to understand that it is a distraction from the real issue. And when you do dive into the truth of that entire 7 years, I think the sexual assault allegations loomed on. There was no real truth to any of it, as it's been proven by multiple sources. And Steve, did you have one thing to add?
Well, I don't even want to be distracted any longer by these false charges. I think Juan has covered them so brilliantly.
Not charges. Allegations, not charges.
Allegations.
Yes, allegations, not charges.
And there's a reference in the chat that there's a full FAQ page on AssangeDefense.org on this. It is a distraction. The other distraction, which was mentioned earlier in the program, we didn't cover it, were the revelations regarding the DNC. And unfortunately, there are liberals in the United States who do not encourage the release of Julian Assange and are critical of Assange because he did make available documents regarding the DNC, and people have blamed Julian Assange for Hillary Clinton losing the 2016 election. So this is another distraction. The truth is, those making those documents available, which were then used by other publications, should be a compliment to Julian Assange. He is a even-handed revealer. He is not politically motivated. He will reveal documents regarding war crimes in the Bush administration, and he will reveal chicanery in the DNC to undermine the candidacy of Bernie Sanders and elevate the candidacy of Hillary Clinton. Nobody, and I think Misty made this point, has ever accused Julian Assange of making false statements or misleading statements because he reveals documents which then can be used by others. So the Swedish allegations, the DNC criticisms are distractions. What is really important is what we've mentioned in passing are the real improprieties and violations of due process in the prosecution of Julian Assange. These recent revelations that Mike Pompeo called for sketches and options to be developed by the CIA to kidnap and assassinate Julian Assange, with Trump asking whether the CIA could assassinate Assange and provide him options on how to do so. Can you imagine that kind of information? Now, the Congress and Adam Schiff have opened an investigation into that. And apparently the second day of the appeal hearing in London on October 28, may address the question of whether prosecutorial misconduct infects the entire prosecution and should lead on an independent ground to its dismissal. This comes only a few months after the revelation that the FBI had collaborated with an informant, Siggy Thordarson, who has now been revealed to have lied to try to accuse Julian Assange of being a hacker. His testimony has been retracted. His credibility has been destroyed, but the US government has not disavowed that testimony or removed it from the record in the extradition hearing. So you have real due process constitutional violations embedded. And it was mentioned already that UC Global was spying on Assange and his lawyers. Any one of these violations of constitutional and international rights would lead to the immediate dismissal of any prosecution that was infected by such wrongdoing on the part of the US government. And that's why it is so astonishing that the Biden administration would perpetuate such a flawed prosecution.
I appreciate it, Stephen. We only have about 30 minutes left. And one of the biggest chunks of this discussion I'd like to get to is, since there's a lot of law students that are watching this as well, is the legal term of stare decisis, which is the legal precedent on past cases that are very similar in the facts of cases and where judges use them to make decisions on a current case. And we have a legal precedent set here for Daniel Ellsberg. Back in 1971, he was charged as the whistleblower for the Pentagon Papers, which led to the exposing the war crimes in Vietnam. It led to the ultimate end of the Vietnam War. And the publication, the journalists that published it was the New York Times. And in that case, the New York Times had never been charged at all for publishing these war crimes and secrets. The only person that was charged was Daniel Ellsberg. And in 1971, he was some similarities in this case where both Ellsberg and Assange were spied on and wiretapped by either the CIA or FBI. They were both charged with the Espionage Act of 1917. They both uncovered government war crime secrets that the public shouldn't have knowledge and access to. Both reasons were given by the US government that sensitive information would cause a security issue and put lives in danger for names not redacted. But nothing ever happened in either instance of people being killed as a result of both releases. And Ellsberg case was dismissed because of the gross government misconduct and illegal evidence gathering by the FBI. CIA did the same, if not very similar, exact scenario that happened to Daniel Ellsberg. The biggest difference in Ellsberg and Assange's case is that Ellsberg was the information source. In this case, that would be Chelsea Manning. And Assange is the New York Times of that case, where the New York Times, the publisher, never was charged. So where, Stephen, as 50 years in your legal work, why has stare decisis not been applied in this case at all, when there's very, very similar?
Well, technically, it never rose to the level of stare decisis because it did not result in a judicial opinion. Stare decisis applies when a court, and usually the United States Supreme Court, renders a decision, and the justices are expected to follow that decision. There have been certain examples, Plessy versus Ferguson and other cases where stare decisis was seen as a form of injustice to follow an unjust ruling. But I get your point that we have the exact parallel. The Nixon administration did open a secret grand jury investigation of the New York Times and later abandoned that. That would have been the parallel of prosecuting the journalist, not the leaker. Now, we should all stand in solidarity with Chelsea Manning and Daniel Ellsberg and Edward Snowden and John Kiriakou and other leakers.
Daniel Hale.
That is an honorable role that leakers play. We are today talking about journalists, and I reject the United States government attempt to, on the one hand, as Misty alluded to, reach out and give extraterritorial reach to the Espionage Act of 1917 to a foreigner who is releasing information, and then turn around and deny him the First Amendment protections that are accorded to everyone who is prosecuted in the United States. The Espionage Act of 1917 would be worth an entire separate seminar. It is one of the most infamous laws that sits on the books. Reading the face of it, it could criminalize any of us for publishing information that we obtain. It could criminalize Seymour Hersh or other journalists, and it's being used to prosecute Julian Assange. It is a shameful statute, and unfortunately, the British judge refused to make binding findings. She should have denied extradition on freedom of the press grounds, as well as humanitarian grounds regarding suicide. But what Misty said cannot be overemphasized. This prosecution poses such a threat to investigative journalism across the world, because what the United States does to this Australian journalist in England, it could do to any journalist when the inconvenient truths that they reveal to the world are the subject of these kinds of prosecutions.
Appreciate your input on that. And does anybody else have any other comment?
No, I think Steve really, laid it out there. I think what is really terrifying in this case is that it essentially boils down to the United States is seeking global jurisdiction over information and journalism. Like Steve said, this means that the United States could go after anyone, anywhere, at any time if somebody publishes or tweets or blogs something that they don't like, that embarrasses them, that they can deem to be a quote unquote national security threat. That is an extreme amount of power, and it really does jeopardize all of us, literally everybody. This is a global thing. This is really something that everybody should be concerned with, and the precedent that will be set if Julian Assange is allowed to be extradited, that's hard to come back from. Once you give those rights away, once those things are damaged, it's a very difficult process to fight to get them back. So we should just not allow it to happen in the first place, and protect the future of press freedom.
Gabriel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the comparison to Daniel Ellsberg's case is a really interesting one. Obviously, there's the difference that Daniel was a leaker and not a publisher, but the repercussions from the plumbers spying on Daniel's psychiatrist, this sort of went all the way to the top. This formed part of Nixon's impeachment. So if you look at Julian's case, with the same lens, like what's happened, this persecution of Julian over all these years is just another WikiLeaks revelation. So we've been able to see corruption of all these institutions that are corrupted, from the Swedish prosecuting authority to the Crown Prosecuting Service in England, the English judiciary, the US DOJ, the CIA. All these institutions have been exposed, as being corrupt. So where will that lead us? When will charges be brought? I think what we will see as time goes on is that some of these institutions will be held to account for what they've done in this case, just like Nixon was held to account for what they did to in Daniel Ellsberg's prosecution.
Appreciate it. And we touched on this a little bit, how is Julian Assange able to be charged in the United States if he has never stepped foot in the United States, aside from asking allies to, extradite him out? How can someone be charged for a crime in the United States if they've never been in the United States?
It's a very serious question. It would have to be litigated by Barry Pollock, Julian's lawyer in Washington, if, God forbid, he is extradited. The government's hook is a claim of acts and information in the United States, the hacking and the fact that files that were revealed by Chelsea Manning then were shared with Julian Assange. But that's a very thin reed on which to base an international dragnet to bring Julian Assange to the United States. And I think, as all of us have said, that alone would set a precedent, because it's the very prosecution, the very pendency of these prosecutions that can have a devastating effect on a journalist. Julian's case is so egregious because of the time he spent in asylum and now in prison, but he has faced the financial burdens, the emotional burdens. Any journalist charged extraterritorially under the espionage would face those kinds of drastic economic and emotional and professional threats during the pendency of the case, which is another reason that we need to put this into your stare decisis treatise as a negative precedent, that we should not give the Espionage Act this kind of territorial reach. We should note for the listeners that the decision that the middle level appellate court will reach based on the hearing this week can be appealed to a higher court in England, and then can be appealed to the European Court of Human Rights. So there are going to be further opportunities if there is any negative ruling against Julian Assange by the British appellate court, he will have these remedies. But can you imagine the toll that it's taking? And the idea that because of a bail violation, which Julian has fully served his time over, he should be released pending these charges. And I had the honor of being on a panel with Gabriel earlier this year and his father. And when I sat shoulder to shoulder with them, I was deeply touched that I can come on as a constitutional lawyer. Misty, Juan is a good friend of Julian's, but Gabriel's brother is in jail and has been tortured and surveilled and had his international rights violated and faces the prospect of that torture continuing in the United States prison system. It is a terrible burden. I respect Gabriel's outspoken nature and the work that his father has done to so lucidly speak up for their brother and their son, and everybody should be moved by that, to take action, to contact Merrick Garland at 202-353-1553, to call the Justice Department, tell them to drop the prosecution of Julian Assange, or go to justice.gov/contact-US to stop this prosecution immediately. Everyone on this program is threatened because every one of us is the recipient of information and knowledge of the kind that Julian Assange has been releasing. So each of you are a target of what this government is doing, and you cannot simply end the day by enjoying a webinar. You must take action in your communities, in your law schools, in your circle of friends and family, to contact the Justice Department and end this prosecution.
Thank you, Stephen.
I
I just want to clarify 1 second, Juan. So the case that's happening this week is at the British High Courts. So you're telling us that there is one court higher in England, and then it would go to a European High Court, correct?
Correct.
Yes. And I think that it's really important to point out that the process, in this case, the process has become the punishment. It is being dragged out. It is, Julian Assange was in illegal and arbitrary detention for 7 years. Now he's been in prison for 2.5 years. This is, like Stephen said, this has been dragged out. And he should have been released after the January 4th ruling for no extradition. The fact that Judge Vanessa Baritzer, ruled in his favor based on mental health grounds, and then decided to continue to keep him in the conditions that caused him to be in a precarious state in his mental health, it seems very ridiculous to me. So at the very least, he should be released at this point to some sort of home arrest or something, so that he can get out of the completely oppressive conditions that he is in Belmarsh. To me, that seems like a very easy decision to be made.
Agreed, is at bare minimum. And Juan, before you comment, you can comment on this as well, is if he were to be extradited to the United States, he would be charged in the Eastern District Court of Virginia. And Juan's documentary touched on this with a great knowledge. And that is the district court that all of the 3-letter agencies in our country are housed. Their families, they live there. Former CIA, FBI, NSA, all live in the Eastern District. So there will be no such thing as a fair jury from that pool. There will be no such thing as a fair jury pool. So Juan, if you wanted to comment on that as well.
Sure. I'd like to just go back a little bit and comment on Nils Melzer's findings when he went to see Julian in prison. And he concluded that Julian was being tortured, psychologically tortured. And he in an interview I had with him, I've had several interviews with him. I'm currently producing another big documentary on Julian. And he says torture is being used not to extract any information from Julian, but rather to intimidate the world and tell them, if you ever dare to expose our dirty secrets, this will happen to you. And this goes exactly to what Misty was just saying. This has been for 11 years a punishment by process. We have seen a massive amount of irregularities and delays to entrap Julian into a closer and closer and closer cell, prison, which is now culminated in a 23.5-hour a day solitary confinement. So this is what's going on and what will continue to happen in my humble opinion. The case, the decision by the court will be announced not that day, but at least 6 weeks after, and I wouldn't be surprised at all that it would carry on all the way to Christmas or even further down the line. And then whatever happens, it seems that the most likely outcome is that there will be an appeal on either side. And there's no reason to think that Julian would be allowed to go free to fight his case under a bail, strict bail conditions. He could, Pinochet, when he was going through an extradition process, he was living in a house with police security outside. When Julian was in the embassy, there were dozens of police people all around, quote unquote, protecting the embassy, right? So there's no reason why Julian needs to be in prison. This is punishment by process. Now, what was your other question? Oh yeah, the jury, the
Eastern District
of Virginia. It's not only the NSA, the CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, and the rest of the intelligence apparatus or military-industrial complex, but also contractors and their family members. John Kiriakou in my film discloses how he hired O.J. Simpson's jury selector to help him pick out a jury, and he said there's no way that there is any that you could get a fair trial in this district. This is the reason why they charged him there. This is the same place that the government intends to carry the process of Julian, and the way they're doing that is by ensuring that he lands on that district. People who are brought from abroad are tried in the district that they land. This is why there's so many New York cases of people that have been brought from abroad. But Julian would be sent to the Eastern District of Virginia, not JFK. There's absolutely no way that Julian would get a fair trial in the US. And then he would be placed under special administrative measures, which is complete isolation. He would spend 24 hours a day completely isolated. They say that there's an hour a day where he could have recreation and breathe fresh air, but that would be just another cell, empty cell, where maybe he could see the sky. And this would be endless. He would not have any appropriate health care or mental health facilities. What is very interesting right now in this hearing is that the DOJ is prepared to prepared to give some guarantees that Julian would be treated in a nice way and make it look like he'd have a, you know, a 5-star spa of some sort in prison. But there's a caveat that they may change their minds in the future. And also, the DOJ does not make the decision if a prisoner goes under SAMS. It's the CIA. It's the institution that planned his murder inside the Ecuadorian embassy. It's this is absolutely insane. What the court right now has to decide is to send them to the country that planned his murder, or to uphold his human rights.
And to charge and to have a fair trial. That's what I mean. Like you just said it, the government that planned to assassinate and kidnap him is supposed to be the same government that is supposed to give him a fair trial, but isn't offering him that First Amendment right.
He hasn't had a fair case
Never.
like now. He hasn't been able to participate in his own defense. They gave him a laptop with the keys glued down. He isn't able to meet with his lawyers on a regular basis. They take his legal papers from him. Nothing about this case has been fair. And that's, as I think it was Stephen said earlier, there are numerous reasons why this case should be lit on fire and thrown out the window. The fact that it is continuing and that we have these appeal hearings on Wednesday and Thursday is complete absurdity. There's nothing about this that makes any sense whatsoever. There's nothing legal or fair about this process, and it needs to be ended now. That's, as Stephen said, please, if you're listening to this or watching this, contact Merrick Garland, contact the Department of Justice, contact the White House, contact your senator or your congressperson or your MP or whoever you can get a hold of. We need lots of noise about this. That's the only thing that will stop it, is immense public pressure.
Julian
Agreed.
didn't
I appreciate it,
read
Misty.
his indictment. Julian didn't read his indictment until the day he went in to his hearing.
Yeah.
I mean, how can somebody plan their defense if they can't see their lawyers for 6 months?
They
prior
spied
to
on
the
him
hearing,
while
and
his
then-
legal team meetings.
And
know.
medical procedures as well,
Yes.
medical examinations. We only have about 7 to 10 minutes left. There's 3 other topics I wanted to discuss. I don't know if we'll reach all of them, but one of them is how come in the 6 years of Obama's presidency, there was no he didn't free Assange, essentially drop everything. And from what I'd seen, there was the conflict with the First Amendment. And is there the ties to tying this also to New York Times and Washington Post were also given information and leaked information the same time that WikiLeaks has? Is there a tie between Washington Post and New York Times as to why they're not being charged for the same thing, but Assange is?
Julian is the easiest target. It's a small organization, publish more secrets than all of the other media combined. They don't have, the massive amount of lawyers that the Washington Post and the New York Times have. But it is those media that are going to face the repercussions of the precedent set in this case. Yeah.
It's called the mainstream media and corporate media for a reason.
Yes.
In so many instances, these publications work hand in glove with the government. Some of us remember Judith Miller, a reporter for the New York Times, who would take essentially White House press releases and statements issued by Dick Cheney and George Bush and turn them into news stories, so that now the New York Times was reporting the kinds of misleading information that Cheney and Bush, propaganda, much better word, wanted to get out with the imprimatur of the New York Times attached to it. So you've got this traditional media that caters. Stories have been held back by the New York Times for over a year because of concerns by the existing administration that it would be embarrassing to the government. Now, I don't want to take away from the moments of the Pentagon Papers and other moments of courage that the New York Times and other publications have exhibited. But it is low-hanging fruit. Juan said it so well, to go after an individual like Julian Assange and nothing else. And that's the New York Times problem that Eric Holder and the Obama administration faced, because they took it seriously and they could not make a principal distinction between Assange's releases and the New York Times release of this information.
Yes, and you explained it
It's also
perfectly.
important-
There's
also
that.
important
Oh,
to
go ahead,
remember
Juan.
that Obama decided not to prosecute, but the grand jury investigation was kept open. And it seems to me like it is obvious that they were following the same strategy as every single administration has had concerning Julian, which is to delay the process as much as possible and punish him for leaking their war crimes.
Yeah, as Stephen mentioned it perfectly, is that when a party wants information to get out and asks, the New York Times to publish something, that's just public relations versus publishing what information you would not want to get out. That is true journalism, which is what Assange has been doing.
And Julian showed us the level of the corruption within the mainstream media during the DNC and the John Podesta leaks. There was, an entire list of like 60 journalists or something who were working directly with the Hillary Clinton campaign. Glenn Thrush famously in the leaks said, "I know this makes me a hack, but here's this article. Do you want to review it before I publish it?" I mean, that's the level of corruption within our mainstream media. We don't have journalism anymore. You have independent media now that is, struggling to survive under all of the censorship and all of the crackdowns in that sense. But I mean, our mainstream media is not doing its job. That's not journalism. Like Chris, you just very well said, it is PR. And what I think we need to remember is that WikiLeaks revolutionized journalism. It really gave us an entirely new way to conduct business in the world of journalism. And I think that a lot of people forget that, the secure Dropbox and all of that stuff, that was very much a WikiLeaks invention, or at least they were able to facilitate it the best for the world of journalism. So I think that it's really telling that the New York Times, and you asked why did the Obama administration not go through, or why did they just kind of leave it open? I think that honestly, and this is just speculation of course, but I think Obama was just concerned about his legacy, and he didn't want to be known as the guy that destroyed the First Amendment, and like Juan said, they just kick the can down the road, and they just leave it dragging out. It's the process by punishment for Julian, and Obama gets to not have to be the one who destroys the First Amendment. But once I think the Vault 7 leaks came out, and they had such a malleable president as Trump, it was easy for Mike Pompeo to initiate the prosecution, essentially.
I appreciate it. And we only have a couple minutes left, and there's two other topics I did want to hit them, but I'll touch on one of them briefly. Is there's a lot of misinformation that is out there about Julian Assange, his past, and WikiLeaks itself. I mentioned earlier was the film We Steal Secrets, which was released in 2013, but it was just put on Netflix yesterday. I put in the chat, which also, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go into the link in the description. You can find all the links that I'd also put in the chat. You'll find them there. But there's a line-by-line response, essentially calling all the falsities of this, the fallacies of this We Steal Secrets. And the first starts off with the title. Julian Assange never has stolen a secret at all in WikiLeaks history. This is all information that is provided to him through encrypted messages on both sides. And he, if he wanted to, cannot find out the source of his information. And he never has given up the source of his information. The only person that was given up was Chelsea Manning through an online chat forum with a third party, had explained that they had given this information to WikiLeaks. The white-haired man was what they called him, which was Julian
Adrian
Assange.
Lamo.
Thank you. And so it goes through line by line all of the and debunks everything in this 2013 video. The film And a lot has come out since 2013. So there's a lot of things that have been proven false, as well as I do recommend watching Juan Passarelli's film, which will also be in the link below. And the last thing was the Yahoo News report, which we talked about briefly throughout, which is the exposing Mike Pompeo and the CIA's plan and Trump administration plan to assassinate and kidnap Julian Assange years ago, all the way up to the president of the United States with applying for information on this process. So my last thing I'd love for all of you to touch on briefly, because we have
Can I just
5 minutes.
quickly give props to Max Blumenthal, because yes, the Yahoo piece did prove it to be accurate, but Max Blumenthal was on that in May of 2020, and the UC Global case also exposed all of that too. So yes, the Yahoo piece was great, and it did a great job of confirming those things, but that was information that I mean, if you're following the case, that's all information that we had long before.
Appreciate it. And it's great that it ended up going mainstream. The last thing, because we have a bunch of people have classes at 6 p.m. So we do have to wrap this up at 55 around the latest, is for everyone's final word is to explain to the viewers out there what are, and I know Stephen's expressed this perfectly, is what are the implications that have happened? What are the implications that happen if this, extradition goes through and Julian does get locked up for 175 years, and explaining how the truth as we may know it disappears.
So
I'll let Stephen start.
I want to start on that.
Or Juan, sorry. Juan, go ahead.
Because the implications are already there. I mean, I've been advised by my lawyers not to travel to the United States because I could be put in prison in another grand jury investigation into, I don't know, the Snowden, the helping Snowden go out of prison, Vote 7, whatever. And this is just because of my proximity to Julian. The Yahoo article published that not only Julian was target to assassination plots, but also Wikileaks journalists, which are include several close friends of mine. They mention Andy Mueller Magunin by name as somebody that could have been a target of assassination. They mentioned several WikiLeaks journalists that are in Europe. So they were planning on executing people in European soil for revealing the truth. What we're seeing with the Julian case also is already a huge deterrent. I mean, what happens if a newspaper gets another Chelsea Manning, another Snowden? Will they decide to publish, or will the editor be surrounded by lawyers advising him not to publish because they could also face charges under the Espionage Act? This, and the most important thing is that we wouldn't even know that these things had taken place. Censorship will become self-censorship will become the norm because of government pressure not to publish their secrets. And this case, if concluded in the way that the United States wants it to, will not be something that we'll see immediately, but we have been seeing steps that have been taken also by the Democratic Party recently, trying to censor the social media and trying to make sure that their political discourse is heard, and that dissenting political discourses are either completely censored or are politically shown in such a light that social pressure becomes so big that they are silenced and by society at large, and what we will see is either self-censorship or more charges under the Espionage Act for journalists.
I appreciate it, Juan. If everyone else would, to
I want to give up my time to Gabriel.
appreciate it, Steve.
Yeah, I think, you know, what we're, like Juan says, we're already seeing the repercussions of this case. You know, all the major editorial boards of, you know, the major newspapers, New York Times, Washington Post, The Guardian, have all voiced their concerns that this case is you know, the biggest threat to press freedoms. A few days ago, what I'm calling the Drop the Charges Coalition, which is now a coalition of 25 press freedom, human rights organizations, you know, including the ACLU, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, all the biggest ones in the US, sent their second letter to the US DOJ saying that this case is a huge threat to press freedom. So it's already happening. I mean, it needs to be dropped. It needs to be wound back. It's a, you know, what's going on is this they're targeting the First Amendment and trying to put you know, trying to contract the reporting this on national security around the First Amendment. So yeah, I think, you know, that's basically, you know, what's going on now, and we're seeing all these organizations, all these editorial boards coming out and saying and supporting the dropping of these charges because it's already having an impact.
Yes, and that letter you just mentioned to the Department of Justice is in the link as well. Misty, last keep it, if you could give it like 30 seconds and we have to
No,
wrap
I
up.
think that Juan and Gabriel said it great. The implications are already there. This is a real threat to all of us. It's not just about Julian Assange. He's just, as I very often liken him, he's the head on the stake. He's the proverbial head on the stake. He's the warning to the rest of us. We've already seen the chilling effect that's happened in journalism around the world. This is something that we need to be actively fighting against all day, every day until it's turned back. So just thank you to you for putting this together. It's honored to be on a panel with these three fine gentlemen. And I see a lot of my fellow activists in the chat. I saw Nat and I saw Emmy and I saw Nathan Fuller's here. Just thank you to all of you for doing what you do. I feel a little bit of I shouldn't be here because there's a lot of amazing activists doing great work out there. So I just want to make sure that you all are getting the props that you deserve to, because I see you out there every day putting in the work and it's amazing. So thank you.
I appreciate all of you. In solidarity with all of you as well. Stay safe out there. The goal is to have this continued conversation after the in beginning of November. So I will keep you all updated as well. And be sure you follow along the case on Wednesday and Thursday and be active about it and reach out to your legislators. So thank you all and be safe out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.